Good news, everyone. Oh, is this move my microphone just a little bit? Hey, everybody. How are we all this afternoon for a countdown stream for the last video of March? I see already that Sir Zhao Zhao, Ducted Stephen, Shakar, the Great Dutchman, Big Seltzer, Quinn Nichols are all, and Hell Fox saying something to you all. Hey, how is it all going, everybody? Oh, I see Aces in here. We've already got the regular crowd coming out. Fiddle. So, welcome. Welcome to this countdown stream, this year countdown stream. So, as far as I had soup for lunch and I'm moving my bowl. So, it's been quite a few. I mean, last time I did a stream like this was on Monday, so not a ton has happened. But I'm going on a vacation this weekend, so it has been very busy because I'm trying to get everything wrapped up and finished before I leave, which means that next week's Step Back video is already available for you patrons. So if you are a patron of Step Back, go to patreon.com and you can watch part 2 of this 2-part video right away. Yes, because this is, as everybody is saying in the chat, this is the Israel video. Go to patreon.com. All patrons get to see my videos sometimes over a week early. I also had to record my Monday video, so that's done. So that's been my Monday. Oh, that's been my week. And yeah, I'll be away this weekend. I will be in Las Vegas for a big, crazy... It's going to be a big, crazy trip with my parents and my wife, because we're celebrating like 3 birthdays that kind of happen in a short succession. So we decided to throw them all together. So here we are. So if this is your first time in this stream, what I do is I take questions from the audience, talk to you guys, and hang out for like an hour of time before a new Step Back video comes out. I can already see, oh, yeah, Ace, what side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict are you on? In common parlance, in like the typical discourse, I would probably put myself more on the side of Palestinians. Because they are victims of a settler colonial project to essentially erase their country off the map. And that project has been going on for about 70 years now. And yeah, that's a thing that's happening. Did I see your tweet? Which tweet was that, Shakar? I do not recall. I'm grabbing my Twitter right now. I don't see any tweet from you. Anyways. Yes, so I am going to, yeah. So this is my video about the history of Israel. Comes out today in about an hour's time. So, yeah. 3 minutes out, we're already talking about Israel. Well, Israel is the subject of the video that comes out at 2 o'clock. So everybody's really excited to hear about Israel. Do you have a degree in history? If so, which one? All right, I'm gonna start taking. I'm gonna start writing these down. Okay. So let's first talk about my educational background, I suppose. So, yeah, I have a degree in history, an honors degree in history. So I do have a bachelor's in history. And I also did a I also have master's degrees. I have 2 master's degrees in history. I finished 1 master's degree in history in 2015. The actual, like the summer before I started Step Back, I basically finished my master's degree in history. And before that, in 2014, I finished a master's degree in American Cultural Studies. So I would probably say, and I also have done 3 years of a PhD in history. I'm post-comps. I'm basically ABD at the moment. And that is on American history as well. So I am pretty close to an expert on post-Civil War United States, with probably a specialty in post-World War II United States. Yeah, so I have United States is my specialty. Thoughts on Jordan Peterson? He is a super right-wing reactionary who has fascist inclinations, wrapped in a faux philosophy that is like almost self-helpish in its demeanor. And by what I said about his obsession with hierarchy and having no questioning of it, he just loves hierarchical systems. He accepts them as just a fact of life, and he seems to think that this is just fine. And then he writes books basically saying how you should be able to compete with others like the lobster you are, not realizing that this is him talking about a society that is unjust and should be fixed. But also he goes on long tangents about how this is inherent because of the yin and yang and the chaotic order of the chaotic blackness of women, the ordered whiteness of men, and all sorts of weird, crazy shit. And then he has the gall to go on these long tangents about how it's postmodern neo-Marxists that are ruining academia, when, you know, he goes on this like Jungian psychological rant that has been, you know, discredited in psychology for over half a century, but he still sticks with it anyway. And so he's just he's a huckster. He's just the worst. And then every time he gets even a tiny bit of criticism, his zombie army comes out, or him himself just like yells at them on Twitter. He's just terrible. Will you do a video on the Jews of Ethiopia? I know that there were Jews in Ethiopia. I don't know too much about them, but the Ethiopia video seemed to have done pretty well. So if there's a cool story behind the Jews who lived in Ethiopia, I would love to hear it, and I could do something about it. What do you think of French leader Emmanuel Macron? Well, Macron is the perfect example of the kind of technocratic centrist that a lot of people want to lead countries that don't actually provide any real solutions to any problems, but make people feel good because they either are attractive or they just say the right things about the very small amount of issues that some people care about. And then when they come to power, they go ahead and ignore pretty much everything that anybody has ever voted for them for. Macron, as soon as he got elected, did basically the opposite of his election ambitions, to the point of pretty much lying. And he reminds me a lot of my own prime minister. My prime minister, Justin Trudeau, who pretty much did the exact same thing. So yeah. And also, nobody talks enough about how Emmanuel Macron like married his high school teacher, which is super weird. And they had like an affair when he was a teenager. Yeah. Do you think post-Brexit Britain could set up some sort of Commonwealth trade union? It'd be exactly like the EU, but even better. Maybe. It depends. I do think that post-Brexit, UK has not too much of a great future. I think that the best idea for, I think that the best option for the UK is to find some way to get out of Brexit as soon as possible and get themselves back into the European Union and apologize as much as possible, because the UK has a lot of British people have this, I shouldn't say that, a lot of English people have this conceited idea of how powerful the UK is. And they think that without the European Union, they're somehow still going to be able to stand as a trade empire, like trying to harken back to, like, I don't know, Victorian fantasies. But Britain has not been a powerful country for a long time. And without the support of the European Union, without that economic trade network that comes with being integrated into the European system, the United Kingdom is going to stagnate and collapse. It'll be just like the 70s. Britain doesn't have much going for it if there's not a group of Europe, if there's not some sort of group to be associated with. Unless we start finding a way to make, like, you know, nuclear fusion fuel out of sheep or something. G-Hawk, do you live in Quebec? No, I don't live in Quebec. I live in Toronto, but I lived in Quebec for 3 years. I did my bachelor's in Quebec. But also, I am from a French-Canadian family. And, like, about 2 generations back, like, my grandmother is a Francophone. And pretty much going that far, that all the way back to, like, the 1600s, we're all French-speaking. How do you think countries should go about infrastructurally setting up UBI? Well, I mean, it'll be different for every country that tries to set up a basic income system, but, like, at the moment, there's a bunch of countries that either have it or are experimenting with it, including here in Ontario. And really, it's just it looks like what they need to do, the only things that will stick out as super important will be to break out of the means testing. Shakar, I saw your tweet, and it's a video, and I can't watch a video while I'm doing a stream. Yeah, so UBI, there's a lot of things that are trying to turn it into some sort of means test where this is only going to be for poor people or something, and that kind of, or for certain types of poor people, people who they deem worthy of UBI. But this is a shitty idea, and I think that it still speaks to this really lame Protestant ethic idea of, like, you have to be worth the right to live and have things, and it's really terrible. And honestly, UBI should be the first step towards breaking that, but it seems that that's the biggest political hurdle. And besides trying to convince people that maybe we shouldn't, you know, judge people's worth as a human being we shouldn't judge people's worth as a human being by their capacity to do labor for other people. Like, yeah, that's a terrible way to think. Okay, let's see. What do you think of the left case for Brexit? I think it's horribly naive, and I don't know how. I think that most people who are pro-Brexit have no idea what was going on. Okay. What are your opinions as a historian on the Jewish people? Am I a historian of the Jewish people? I doubt it. I don't really do. I'm not Jewish. I don't have great expertise in Jewish history. I guess I should play this video, huh? See how this goes. All right, so apparently his name is not Shakara Shacharo. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to do that one. I'm sorry. I am too much of an Anglophone for that name. I apologize. I'm going to anglicize names because I don't speak Hebrew. I am very sorry. All right. Let's get back to questions. I'm almost fluent in French. Any suggestions? I speak a lot of French due to having a French girlfriend, but I want to learn more, but I'm struggling. Well, Ace, you're still in the European Union for now. Why don't you get on the channel whenever you have the chance? If you want to get some more time practicing French, go to France. I know you live in the United Kingdom, so if you ever have the opportunity, get down to France, maybe go see, I don't know, go to Choute or spend like a weekend in Paris or something, and just kind of talk to people. That's the way I learned French, as I did a thing. I did a government program where I spent 5 weeks in this super French thing where the government pays you to basically speak French nonstop for 5 weeks. They will actually like give you these like red cards if you're caught speaking English, and they'll kick you out of the program if you're caught too many times speaking French. And so, yeah, that was a fun month. I did it, and that I learned so much French in that period. So really, you need to go somewhere where like there's no people who speak French, or sorry, there's no people who speak English, and just force yourself to speak French all the time. Ordering coffee in French, ordering or talking to people in French, like literally just everything. Okay. Do you think that the odds are for Tsar Putin conquering the Baltic states, albeit I don't think it'd be worse for Belarus? As far as that, I think that, especially after the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula, that probably Russia's not in the game of like conquering countries anymore is not really a thing that people can do in the future. And that's difficult. And so what really should happen is, oh man, I completely lost train of thought there. What was I even talking about? Oh gosh. Okay. It's gone. Oh yeah, Russia invading the Baltic states, and the fact that there's not going to be any like straight annexations of countries anymore. Right. So, like that's not like what's it called? A tiny version of it went down, and that was it made Russia an international pariah for several years until people decided to get over it for some reason. I think that mainly what Russia's goal is for geopolitics is to go to war with countries that they will claim are either oppressing ethnic Russians in their country or quote unquote, doing something that is disruptive, or sort of like the reasons they invaded Georgia, invade the country and mostly try to do more Black Opsy type tactics or trying to mess with their political system in order to have pro-Russian leaders run the country. And instead of expanding their literal borders, which is not really a thing that happens anymore, expanding their zone of influence, especially competing against American puppets. So, for example, if you see a power vacuum in a place like Iran, or if you see a power vacuum in a place like Syria, you're going to see Russia trying to exert its influence to try and prop up a pro-Russian leader. And I do think that if you all of a sudden start seeing these protests showing up in countries like Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, that are all of a sudden super pro-Putin, you'll probably know that there was something going on. I thought your internet went down. It was. Last week, my internet was down for about a day and a half. Unfortunately, that day was Thursday, and so I wasn't able to do my stream. Anglos really are the worst pronunciation, huh? I mean, depends on the person, but for me, you know, you can only really pronounce... Sometimes syllables that you're not accustomed to are really hard to pronounce. And practicing, especially something like Semitic languages like Hebrew, would be quite a lot of work. What's your opinion on Archbishop Iakovos of America? And would you consider doing a video on him, please? I have literally, this is probably the first time I've ever heard of the name Archbishop Iakovos. I would need an explanation as to what that's all about. Let's see. I'm hopeful that we have a huge left wave, but what if we get the opposite of that, a reactionary movement to the left? That would be very sad, and I think that that's something that we should be trying to look out for and combat at any case. And I do think that dealing with the radical right is one of the more important things that we need to be handling in this day and age, because with liberalism basically on the collapse, it's going to fall apart. Liberalism is falling apart at the seams. As Slavoj Žižek would say, that capitalism is hitting its final crisis, and so on and so on. And because capitalism's hitting its final crisis, people are turning to alternative ideologies, trying to get themselves, find some sort of alternative. This exact same thing happened in the 30s. It's just that in the 30s, a lot of people turned to fascism and nobody stopped them. And what we need to do at this point is stop them. So we really need to defeat fascism where it's growing now, and hopefully move into a post-capitalist order that makes a little bit more sense. Tsar Putin will basically do what he did in the U.S. to the Baltics. Is the U.S. a Baltic state? Russia's been doing that whole meddling thing in way more countries than the United States. They've already shown evidence of doing it in the French elections, in the German elections, in the some people are even saying Brexit, but also it was part of the propaganda war that led to like the internal fighting in Ukraine that's still going on to this day. Their 2012 invasion of Georgia that people don't talk too much about anymore. So there's a whole, this happens a lot. Opinion on the Pope not apologizing for residential schools. I did not know that that was the case. It seemed like a thing that Pope Francis would do. That's very sad. I wish that he would do that. That's super shitty, because Canada really needs to reconcile the injustice that was done to the Indigenous peoples of this country with the residential school system. And the Pope apologizing for the residential schools would go a long way towards beginning the healing process. And that makes me really sad that the Pope hasn't done that. What do you know about the Holodomor, and how can you dismiss the claims of white supremacists that Jews in the Soviet Union caused the Holodomor? Well, Many Dog, first of all, you can the reason why. So for those who don't know, the Holodomor was basically a planned famine that happened in Ukraine during Stalin's Soviet Union, and a lot of people died. Like a lot of people died, and it was mostly it seems that, anyways, it was a thing that Stalin did in order to starve the Ukrainians who were resisting the Sovietization of Ukraine, or like, the collectivization of things in Ukraine. Not the best way to handle things, in my opinion. And unfortunately, anything that has to do with communism by Nazis, they just say that all communism, all of it, all the time, is a secret plot by Jews to take over the world. And yeah, you can dismiss it because the Soviet Union was not a secret plot by Jews to take over the world. Sorry, Nazis. That's pretty shitty. That's what the Holodomor is. It was a planned famine that happened in the Ukraine in, I think, the 30s or the 40s. No, it wouldn't be the 40s. The 30s. Whew. That was a lot of words. Oh, I think I have take a look at that later. Okay. Bishop Iakovos of America was one of the only non-African American clergymen to march with Martin Luther King at Selma. Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I definitely need to do some more Black History stuff. How's the dissertation going? I haven't seen my supervisor in a long time, so I can't really say too much. I will have an update for you on how my dissertation's going, let's say in May. Okay? Whew. It is quite a day. Oh my. It's a big-ass truck trying to pull into a tiny alley over there. I was told that the Holodomor was not a genocide, considering that there was no intention of destroying the Ukrainian people. Well, Corentin Belanger, this is very much in the eye of the beholder type thing. There's genocide is the intentional attempt to destroy an entire people based on their ethnicity. I believe. Now, I'm not like an expert on Sovietology, so I can't speak to this like as a brain smart person. But from what I remember, that the Soviets probably did it in order to suppress anti-Soviet protest, an anti-Soviet organization. And that sucks because, yeah, I'm not even going to acknowledge that, Ace. Stalin did a shit ton of things wrong, and this is definitely one of them. There are lots and lots of people who have dead family members because of Stalin's actions. And I would challenge you to talk to one of them off the internet and try to tell them that one of the greatest mass murderers in human history did nothing wrong. Because, yeah, even as a leftist, I refuse to apologize or to make apologetics for the Soviet Union. They were a totalitarian regime that used the power of the state, the violence of the state, to oppress people and force them into a collectivization program that was, one, not very good, and two, it was done. It was non-consensual, which is not the way that you're going to move forward with civilization. Stalin was probably one of the worst things to happen to the left in human history. What's your opinion of extra history YouTube series, and how would you tell if a historian is good or not? All right. I can answer those questions. So let's talk. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about Extra History. So Extra History is a good YouTube series. I really like pretty much everything that the Extra Credits channel is pumping out. I am pretty happy with how they cover things. I think that they are fair. I think that they cover they try very hard to have good historical accuracy. The problem, and I think this comes from the fact that they run polls on Patreon and their patrons choose their subject matter for them, that they are overwhelmingly war focused and their channel is almost entirely military history. And in my opinion, even on YouTube, history and in a lot of popular culture, history is still way too military focused. We think way too much about war and not enough about other things. And I think that Extra History does play into that a little bit. And if I had one criticism of Extra History, it's that they are literally always talking about war. And I think they could do better. I think that they have the research chops, the storytelling chops, the art skills to tell some amazing stories from the past, and they don't. Because they know that what brings in the views is war. All war, all the time. Let's see where we can go now. Yeah, for example, Corentin is right. The episode about Emperor Justinian, that was a great series. That's when they got away from just generals and warfare for a bit, and it was really good. All right, you're gonna go eat some matzahs because it's Passover tomorrow. Nice. All right. Thoughts on Gorbachev? He's still alive. You know that he's really old, and he was in politics until like 2008 or something. I read an interview with him a couple years ago, and it was pretty interesting because he was saying about like his opinion about Putin and his opinion about Obama and things like that. And it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. I love that Gorbachev is still alive and that he can still that story can still happen. I think Gorbachev was. I like things about him and I don't like things about him. That's with most people. Okay, that doesn't answer much. I think that Gorbachev's instincts were good. I think that Gorbachev, when he took control of the Soviet Union, he saw a country that was immobile, inflexible, and built upon this hierarchy of yes, boss, and ignoring some glaring problems with the Soviet government and Soviet society. And he tried to fix those. And he tried to fix them in ways that I think are pretty good, like with opening the government and liberalization and trying to open up for open and free elections. I think those were all really good ideas. I do think, though, that with his idea of opening up the Soviet Union, also opening up capitalism was the big problem. I also think that he didn't do enough work to try and build the story of what the Soviet Union was. Things like the Holodomor were not forgotten by a lot of people in the Soviet Union who were not Russian. And so there were a lot of various ethnic groups within the Soviet Union that were extremely angry with the way the USSR had treated them. And I think that if Gorbachev were to keep the project going and keep communism going, he would have had to reinvent the story of the Soviet Union and the story of what they were working on, what they were trying to do, their attempt to make Marx's dream come true. And, opening Pizza Huts in Moscow is not the way you do that. So maybe that's because he was more pragmatic than I am. But I think that in the end, he was far too open to capitalism. He was far too much of a liberal. And while I praise him for doing a lot to increase the democratization of the Soviet Union, eventually it's opening up to capitalism, and his tolerance for nationalist movements are what caused the Soviet Union to break apart. And I think that is really sad. You just finished a side quest in D&D and earned 1,000 experience points. Yikes! What level are you at? That's a lot of experience if you're playing 5th edition. Yes. Okay. The video on the Broad Street Pump, the South Sea Bubble, Writing in Currency. You're like basically saying all of the best extra history episodes. I wish they did more like that and less of like just outlining the life of another conqueror. I don't know. That's just me. All right. Do you think Bernie will win the Democratic primary? I think he stands a good chance. He's got a few things he's going to have to deal with. First of all, there's going to be a lot more interest in the Democratic primaries than there was in 2016, because with how bad Trump is doing, I think that even though this is probably misguided, there's going to be this assumption that whoever wins the Democratic primary is pretty much going to be president. So that'll be a problem. And the other thing is that, okay, level 11, 1,000 experience makes sense. Yeah, so, gosh, I have to stop getting distracted. I go to write down a question, and then I lose track of what I was. Oh yeah, Democratic primary. Okay, so the Democratic primary. So yeah, he's got. There's going to be a lot more interest. He's going to be definitely the front runner right away, because I don't think that anybody who's trying to emerge their name on the stage is going to have the brand power that Bernie Sanders has. Like, the best chance they have is like Kirsten Gillibrand, who like is going to have a lot of money but doesn't have that name recognition. And I think that Sanders is going to have the name recognition out of the gate. He's going to benefit from the fact that he has the most recognizable brand out of what is looking to be a very big field of Democratic primary people. He is going to have to choose probably pretty early a good running mate, because there's going to be a lot of questions about his age, which while I don't think that it's an okay, while I don't think it disqualifies him from running for president, I do think that it is something that he has to address. Because while he might not be if he does die in office, he will have to have a good vice president. I don't understand why the president dying in office and giving it to a vice president all of a sudden disqualifies them from being president in the first place, but that's just me. But he is going to have to address it in a way that makes sense. And if he can do that, I do think he stands a good chance of getting through the primary process. Way more than last time. And he almost won last time. So, yeah, I think that there's a good chance. I think the centrists have lost a lot of their power. I think that there has been a groundswell of interest in Sanders' position and socialism in America that could definitely make things a lot better in 2020 than they were in 2016. All right, let's see. I think people like war because they are frustrated with the lack of political progress in their lives and they like to see the power of war to dramatically change society in a short period of time. Well, that might be true. I also think that when it comes to compelling narratives, that we're often taught that wars are like the most important thing that happens in history. Wars have a definite beginning, middle, and end. They have characters. They have important events. So like they're really easy to comprehend and tell a story about. While talking about something like the South Sea Bubble, for example, is a pretty hard thing. It's a harder thing to write a story about, and so it's less easy to make a good narrative and also to sell it to an audience. And so I think that it's just easier to make a war into a sexy history video than, say, something like, the South Sea Bubble or Tulip Mania, which is something I've been wanting to make a video about for a long time. Okay. Do you think that Cubans' low illiteracy rates is a social success story? To an extent, I think that a lot of things in Cuba show that show the kind of power that a socialist society can have. The fact that Cubans are so healthy, the fact that they're so educated, given how the most powerful country on earth had tried to strangle them to death for decades. The immense resilience they've shown in the wake of U.S. imperialism shows that, yeah, Cuba's done pretty well for itself. I'm quite impressed by what they've been able to manage. And so, yeah, I think that success should not be undersold. How do you feel about Justin Trudeau? I voted for him, and I regret it. I've been regretting it for years because he's the most... When he was running for... Can we get a house tour? My house is so small, it would not be a very long tour. I live in a 750 square foot apartment. All right. And also, this is a webcam that is attached to my desktop. This isn't a laptop or anything like that. Justin Trudeau was elected in a context where we were trying to get rid of Stephen Harper. And we did. We got rid of Stephen Harper. That was a success. I was happy for that. The problem is that he campaigned with a lot of... He campaigned on a promise to undo the first past the post system. And so a lot of people, myself included, voted for the Liberals because we were planning on getting anybody but the Conservatives into power, because we knew that both the NDP and the Liberals were interested in making sure that that this would be the last first past the post election. Then he walked back on it. And then every single progressive thing he said he would do, he backed up on. And then he became super duper right wing and only did this like really lame, like performative progressivism, like saying that he's a feminist to get all of the BuzzFeed articles to like him, but then selling weapons to Saudi Arabia or dragging his feet on the investigation into murdered and missing Indigenous women, and saying that all of a sudden he's like this great like feminist icon. It's like, it's all he does, everything he does, all of his progressive policies are these empty performances. And he never does anything of substance. And unfortunately, he's good at tricking just enough people who don't pay attention to have people like him. He's losing a lot of support in Canada, though, and we have an election coming up next year. So we'll see how that goes. I could see Justin Trudeau losing his government. Unfortunately, he'll probably lose it to Andrew Scheer, the Conservative, and that's a little... I would be pretty stressed out by that. But, you know, one thing at a time. Hello, Doughboy DeVito. Okay. How do you like the new Stellaris 2.0 update and Apocalypse expansion? I like it a lot. I think a new Stellaris patch actually just came out today, right? I think I should probably check it out. I should probably check it out today. I'm going on a trip, so I've been really busy today, but I should play a little bit. What's your opinion on Crash Course History? Crash Course History is great. I used to be a TA. I was a TA in when I was still lived in London and I was a grad student. So, and I still am a grad student, but like when I lived in the same city as my campus, I was a TA, and I used to use Crash Course US History a lot because it's a really great series, and it's based on the textbook that we used to use to teach the course, and so it was perfect, and I think it's really good. What are the Democratic primaries? It's a series of elections and caucuses and a bunch of weird traditions about how the two American political parties decide who their presidential candidate's going to be. It is ridiculous. It is anti-democratic, but it's what America does, and there's a ton of pageantry around it. Are you a cultural Marxist, postmodern globalist who wants to destroy Western culture? Sure. Yeah, why not? Who do you think will most likely survive the American prison? You or your wife? Definitely my wife. Men's prisons are way more brutal. Second of all, I am not a good rules follower. And third of all, I would suck. I would not be able to handle that much boredom. I would probably go bananas. I'd probably end up in solitary confinement for being ridiculous. So yeah, I definitely think that is a problem, or that is something to deal with. My wife would do better in those situations, but she knows how to be political and she knows how to not get yourself in trouble, which I do not. What do you think about the follow? Are you following the recent developments in Korea, and do you think the peninsula would be nuclearized? All I know is that Kim Jong-un met with Xi Jinping recently, but I don't know what happened there. Did you hear that graduate TAs might be striking? Only like every day, because my union sends me emails about it, because my university is also looking at striking. So yeah, it's a thing that's coming up. You're playing 4th edition, you're level 11. Good job. I've never been to level 11. I'm playing 5th edition, and the highest character I've ever played got to level 5 and died. Now I'm level 5, but I'm like really far from level 6. So it'll be a long time before I see more of that stuff. Do you know anything about the American census in 2020? Yes. The census is the one time per decade when the United States draws information about the people who live in the country, and they use it to decide what districts are going to look like, how many electoral college votes states are going to have, things like that. The last time the census was drawn or was done was in 2010, and in 2010 was the peak of the Tea Party wave, and in 2020. By the way, the Tea Party wave basically put in a huge amount of Republicans, and the Republicans redrew all the districts to benefit them. And that's why America is gerrymandered in favor of the Republicans to the point where the Democrats, like more people in America vote Democratic than Republican by like a gigantic margin, but Republicans still win. And it's because the country is gerrymandered to all hell. And the only way to even attempt to fix that is to have like a Democratic government in 2020, so that when the districts are redrawn, Democrats they'll probably gerrymander it for themselves, but at least it won't be the other way around. Okay. What is your initial impression on Hearthstone's upcoming expansion? Isn't it like a kind of like werewolfy thing? I haven't played Hearthstone in a long time because it got too expensive, because all I like to play was Arena. and I wasn't good enough to have it so that my arena runs were paying for themselves. So Hearthstone was getting too expensive for me to play because it'd be $2 every time I wanted to play arena, and I was like, yeah, screw it. But I know they have an upcoming expansion that has to deal with werewolves and ghosts and like kind of like spooky stuff. And I don't know, could be good. I have no idea. When teachers strike, can students go to school? Typically not, but with the TA strike, they're actually planning on like aiming it for the summertime so that the TAs will be on strike mostly for blocking summer classes. So for the most part, things won't be affected, which I think defeats the purpose of the strike, but whatever. Someone should record these live streams and make a video of Tristan ranting for 1 hour against capitalism. I imagine that would be a fun supercut. Oh god, like just those like long anti-capitalist rants that I'll go on. That'd be crazy. Why do you think today's youth are becoming communist and fascist? Well, I already did the Slavoj Žižek thing, but I'm not going to take off my shirt and wail my arms. But it's because capitalism is entering into a crisis right now, just like it did in the 30s. And when capitalism's internal inconsistencies fall apart, see you later, Corentin, that's when things get ugly and people try to find alternative solutions. And unfortunately, people who decide to scapegoat minorities rather than face the systemic problems that are causing the problems we have turn into fascists. What's the thing with the memes about Macron being Jupiter? No idea. First time I've ever heard of it. Have you ever Googled any people you knew in middle school / high school? Any interesting findings? Yeah, one of my best friends in elementary school turned out to be a philosophy professor at U of T. So that's kind of cool. But besides that, I haven't Googled a ton of people. I think I was born in this... I think I was born into a generation of fail sons because, like, we're too young to be like the Silicon Valley billionaires, but we're too old for like any hope. And so there's like this group of this generation that kind of got a little screwed over, and there's like people born in the late 80s, and yeah, so you know we haven't amounted to a whole bunch. Why do you think nationalism is becoming so popular? Oh, thank you, girl. You don't notice. I appreciate the $4.99. So nationalism is a thing that we can cling to for some sort of narrative to tell us about ourselves. We live in a society where we are so bereft of anything to belong to. We have no clubs. We have no identities. We have no community. And so when you lack that kind of narrative, things like nationalism can step in as a way to feel like you belong to something in this world where we are all kind of feeling listless and unable to belong to any sort of movement. Unfortunately, nationalism is like the worst thing to sign up for if you want to belong to something. It promotes you becoming a xenophobic, racist person who has this cloistered mentality and thinks that, you know, people who look like you are super important. And it's toxic. It's terrible. But the left, especially the, like, you know, centrist, like BuzzFeed left, isn't offering a viable alternative. And because of that, there's nothing else to turn to. And I really wish that we could have some sort of group solidarity that, you know, everyone belongs, everybody's good, everybody's a human being, and that comes with you being worth something. And unfortunately, liberals can't push themselves that hard to believe that everybody is worth something. So here we go. They turn to nationalism. Hope that was a $5 answer. Um, hmm. You were born in 2000, which means you're raised post Columbine and post 9/11. So, what do you think can be said about your generation? I think that your generation has a way more. It has a culture that is very hard for people even born. Like, if you're born in 2000, I'm 12 years older than you. That's not crazy amount, but it seems that even having a little bit of a pre-internet childhood makes some things just make no sense. Like the role of memes amongst like people in that age range is so confusing to many of us. Um, and just the oversharing culture and all that kind of thing. Although I don't want to be a grouchy old person who speaks shit about young people. I think young people today seem to be way more in tune with political activism than I've ever seen in my generation. I think that there's been, because you guys you would have been about 8 years old when the financial collapse happened, that you've grown up in the depression. You've grown up in the new depression, and I think that that means that a lot of people your age are a lot more aware of the thing, are a lot aware that the world is not the way it should be, in a way that my generation, the people who made like BuzzFeed and Facebook and stuff, don't. And I think I really appreciate that. I think that the young people today seem to be gravitating towards extremes. Lot of tankies, a lot of literal Nazis, and I wish that the Nazi part would stop. I wish that tankies would stop, but you know, I saw that you're playing fourth edition and you're level 11. I've seen it. I don't know why you keep repeating it. Um, I do think that you guys are we're all in the same boat for a lot of things. We're all fighting for careers. I think that maybe people my age who, unlike me, didn't go to grad school are probably faring better than you guys, but who knows? Geez, 2005, I was almost finished with high school. Um, oh yeah, Doughboy DeVito, you being a first generation immigrant changes so many things. You have a whole surrogate culture. You've being of Mexican descent in America has so many connotations. It's an identity in and of itself. Um, as for generational divide, it does mean that as a Latinx person, you are part of the fastest growing and youngest demographic in America, which means that I would hope, for a lot of young Latinx people, they realize that they're going to be the future of the country. They are the fastest growing, youngest ethnic group in the United States. And I really wish that they could talk about that and talk about, like, they have a future. There's a future for, hopefully. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, your parents were from Mexico, so yeah, you're a first generation. First generation, yeah, they're first generation born in the United States. There's still that impact. Holy crap! It is almost 2 o'clock. How does the time fly? Whew. Alrighty. I think we've had quite a lot to chat about today. This has been quite awesome. I think that we learned a lot today. We talked a lot. I definitely feel like I've talked a lot. My voice is rather raw compared to previous streams, so I imagine that it's been quite a lot. So you guys, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much, the girl that I done notice, for the super chat. And new video comes out super soon. It comes out in 5 seconds. All right, everybody. There's the link to the new video. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's part 1 of a 2-parter about Israel. And of course, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next Thursday. Have a nice Easter weekend if that's the thing you're doing, or Passover as as you would have. Peace.